The morning sun hadn't fully settled into the sky yet when I pulled onto the highway, but its light was already beginning to stretch across the asphalt in long, sleepy gold ribbons. I adjusted the visor, more out of nerves than necessity, and gave myself a small pep talk under my breath. I'd been preparing for this interview for weeks, reading every article about the company, checking their social media, rehearsing answers in the mirror until even I was tired of hearing my own voice. But still, my heart beat harder than I wanted it to. The steering wheel felt warm beneath my palms. I could almost feel my pulse thumping against the leather. This is it, I told myself, a new start, a new chapter. Maybe even the kind of job that makes you wake up excited instead of exhausted. The hum of the engine blended with the faint whoosh of passing cars as the city slowly opened ahead of me. Fields turned into clusters of buildings, and the early morning quiet shifted into something busier, more alive. But inside my car, it still felt like a bubble, a tiny, moving cocoon where it was just me, my nerves, and whatever fate was waiting on the other end of the drive. I cracked the window slightly, letting the cool air sweep across my face. It helped, gave me something else to focus on besides whether my resume formatting looked professional enough, or if they'd asked the dreaded, "Tell me about yourself," question in some trick version designed to trip me up. The radio was on low, barely audible, playing something soft and wordless. Piano, maybe. It fit the mood, calm on the surface, jittery underneath. I tightened my grip on the wheel, then loosened it, forcing my shoulders to drop from where they'd somehow crept up toward my ears. "Just get there on time," I whispered. "You can handle everything else after." The highway wasn't busy, which surprised me. A few cars spaced out here and there, but nothing overwhelming. It gave me room to breathe, to rehearse a few answers in my head, to imagine walking into the building with confidence, maybe even faking it until I felt it. As I curved around a long bend in the road, the sunlight shifted again, spilling brighter across the pavement. I lifted my hand to shade my eyes for a second, and when I lowered it, something caught my attention up ahead. A car was parked on the shoulder, angled slightly like the driver had pulled over fast. Hazard lights blinked in slow, rhythmic flashes, tiny orange beacons pulsing in the daylight. At first, I thought they might be waiting for someone, or on a call, or dealing with some small annoyance, but then I saw him. A guy stood beside the car, staring down at a very flat tire with the exact expression I've worn when something goes wrong before coffee. Defeated, annoyed, and maybe debating whether crying would help or not. I slowed instinctively, my foot easing off the gas before I even thought about it. People always tell me I'm too helpful for my own good, that I should be more careful, or mind my own business, or at the very least not pull over on random highways because you feel bad for strangers. But that's just never been me. If someone needs help and I'm there, that's the end of the conversation. It's almost automatic. As I approached, I felt the familiar tug of responsibility, that warm little electric buzz in my chest that said, "If you don't stop, who will?" I flicked on my blinker, guided my car onto the shoulder, and rolled to a gentle stop a few yards behind him. For a moment, I just sat there, exhaling slowly, letting the engine quiet. Then I reached for my toolkit in the back seat. The interview could wait a few minutes. Right now, someone needed a hand. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I stepped out of the car, the morning breeze lifting a few strands of hair across my face. The air smelled faintly of hot rubber and dust, that unmistakable scent of a tire that has absolutely given up on life. The guy standing next to it turned at the sound of my door closing, and for a split second his expression shifted from confusion to relief. "Hey," I called, giving a small wave as I approached. "Looks like you had a rough start to the morning." He let out a breathy laugh, the kind you release after a long stretch of frustration. "Yeah, you could say that. I'm pretty sure this tire didn't just go flat, it died of spite." I smiled as I reached his car and crouched beside the tire. It was worse up close than I'd realized, completely deflated, the rim practically kissing the asphalt. "Oh yeah," I said, tapping the side of it. "This one's on life support." He laughed again, actually laughed, like the situation suddenly felt fixable, and that alone made stopping worth it. "You need help?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. "I don't really know what I'm doing. I mean, I know what needs to happen, but the execution is where I'm failing miserably. I think the tire jack hates me. good news," I said, standing up and brushing my hands on my jeans. "I brought my own jack. It hasn't betrayed me yet." I walked back to my car, popped open the trunk, and grabbed my toolkit. The familiar weight of it felt grounding, a small reminder that even if life throws chaos at you, there are some things you can still fix with your own two hands. He watched me with that relieved, but awkward expression most people get when someone swoops in to help them with something they should, in theory, be able to figure out on their own. Seriously, thank you. I've been out here for like 20 minutes pretending I know what I'm doing. "Fake it till you make it," I said with a grin, "but today I'll help you make it a little faster." As I knelt again beside the tire, he crouched down next to me, trying not to get in the way, but also clearly wanting to participate. The ground was cold beneath my knees, a little uncomfortable, but not enough to matter. I positioned the jack under the car frame and gave it a few solid pumps. He watched every motion like I was conducting a master class. "So, you've done this before." "Oh yeah, more times than I'd like to admit. I used to drive an old car with a very dramatic personality. We had plenty of roadside bonding moments." He chuckled. "Guess I should have made friends with someone like you sooner." I felt my cheeks warm slightly, not in a romantic way, just in that flattered, by a random, compliment kind of way. "Don't worry," I said. "You're learning now." As I loosened the lug nuts, he held the flashlight from his phone even though it was bright outside. The gesture was oddly sweet, like he wanted to contribute something, anything, even if the sunlight made the flashlight completely unnecessary. We chatted while I worked simple things, morning commutes, cars that break down at the worst possible times, jobs, weekend plans. He had an easy laugh, the kind that echoed warmly without feeling forced. When the spare tire finally slid into place, he let out this dramatic sigh like we'd just won a battle together. "You are officially my hero today," he said, hand over his heart. I shook my head, smiling. "Just someone who hates seeing people stranded on the side of the road." As I tightened the last lug nut, he stood up and offered me his hand to help me up. I took it, letting him pull me to my feet. My knees were a little dusty, my palms smudged with dirt, but it felt good, like I'd done something meaningful in the middle of my nerve-filled morning. "You really saved me," he said sincerely. "I owe you one." "You don't," I replied, "but hey, good luck with the rest of your day." "You too," he said, smiling wide, "and I hope your morning goes a lot better than mine did." I gave him a quick wave, packed up my toolkit, and headed back to my car. As I pulled away, I caught a glimpse of him in the rearview mirror standing there, hands on his hips, shaking his head in disbelief like he'd just witnessed some kind of roadside miracle. I had no idea then just how much that tiny moment would come back to me later. But the universe had its own plans. 2 weeks passed, and life slipped back into its usual rhythm, or whatever counted as usual, in my world. The morning of the roadside flat tire became one of those small, oddly satisfying memories I carried with me. The kind that reminded me I wasn't completely failing at being a decent human being. But work, sleep, and interview prep swallowed up the days, and the moment gradually drifted to the background, which is why, when my phone buzzed one quiet afternoon, I didn't immediately think anything of it. I was standing in the kitchen, halfway through making a cup of tea I'd probably forget to drink, when I heard the faint vibration against the counter. At first, I assumed it was a notification, some random email or group chat lighting up again, but then I saw the caller ID. My stomach tightened. It was the company, the one I'd been obsessing over, the one whose interview I had driven to the day of the flat tire incident. My hands suddenly felt too warm, and the mug I was holding became a liability. I set it down carefully, very carefully, as if hot tea and high anxiety were a dangerous combination. For a moment I just stared at the screen, trying to stop the pre-interview spiral from starting all over again. Do I sound ready? Do I sound awake? Do I sound desperate? Please don't sound desperate. I took a breath, smoothed down the front of my shirt like that would somehow influence the phone call, and answered. Hello, my voice came out surprisingly steady. A win. Hi, this is the HR department from. My brain filled in the rest before the voice finished. I nodded instinctively, even though she couldn't see me. She explained they were reviewing applications and wanted to move forward with interviews. Her tone was upbeat, almost cheerful, but there was something else woven into it, a faint amusement, like she knew something I didn't. A tiny knot formed in my chest. Amusement was not the typical corporate tone. As she listed available dates, I found myself pacing slowly around the kitchen island, fingers drumming against the counter. The tea steamed gently, abandoned, while I scrambled internally to sound like a person who had her life visibly together. Yes, that works for me. I said when she offered a time slot. Yes, thank you so much. Yes, I'm really looking forward to it. And I was. I absolutely was, but the whole conversation had this strange undercurrent like a joke I wasn't in on yet. At one point, I even wondered if she was laughing at me. When I hung up, the kitchen suddenly felt too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator was loud. The ticking of the clock seemed obnoxious. I stared at my phone for a long moment, like it might give me clues. That was weird, right? I muttered to myself, but maybe it wasn't weird. Maybe I was just overthinking. Maybe HR people were trained to sound vaguely mysterious. Maybe I'd just become paranoid after too many job applications. I picked up my tea, took a sip, immediately burned my tongue, and set it back down like it had betrayed me. Still, the odd tone stuck with me. Her voice had held this little curve of amusement, not unprofessional, but almost familiar, like something was funny in the best way, and she was waiting to see if I'd notice. I shook the thought off, ran my hands through my hair, and grabbed my laptop. If they wanted to interview me, I was going to prepare like my life depended on it again. Back to practicing answers in the mirror, researching the company culture, rehearsing stories from past jobs that made me sound competent without sounding rehearsed. But every few minutes, my brain wandered back to the call. That strange tone, that almost laugh, it bothered me enough that by the end of the day, I was convinced I must have said something awkward during the phone call. Maybe I'd thanked her too many times. Or not enough times, or the wrong number of times, but despite the overthinking, a spark of excitement flickered all the way through me. It had been a long time since I felt this wanted, this potentially chosen. It wasn't until the day of the interview, when I walked into the room and finally saw him sitting there, that the confusion of the call snapped into perfect, unbelievable clarity. But in that quiet kitchen, clinging to a cup of oversteeped tea, I was just one very hopeful woman with a phone in her hand and absolutely no idea what twist of fate was coming next. The lobby smelled like fresh coffee and ambition, that oddly specific mix you only find in offices where everyone is trying to prove something. I checked in at the front desk, smoothed my blouse, and tried to breathe normally, even though my heart was beating loud enough that I was pretty sure the potted plant beside me could hear it. Conference room 3B, the receptionist said with a bright smile. "Thank you," I replied, returning a smile that I hoped looked confident, and not like I was seconds away from dying of nerves. I walked down a hallway lined with framed motivational quotes. I didn't read any of them. My brain was too busy rehearsing answers to imaginary questions. What's your biggest strength? What's your biggest weakness? Describe a time you overcame a challenge. Do not mention crying in your car. Do not mention coffee addiction. When I reached 3B, I paused with my hand on the handle. My stomach tightened, and I took one steadying breath in through my nose, out through my mouth, the kind of breath you take before stepping onto a stage you weren't entirely convinced you belonged on. Then I pushed the door open. The room was bright, filled with morning light pouring through the tall windows. A polished wooden table sat in the center, minimalist and modern. Everything was clean, orderly, professional. But all of that vanished from my awareness the moment I saw him. He was sitting at the far end of the table, flipping through a folder. When he looked up, recognition flashed instantly across his face, warm, amused, unmistakable. The guy from the roadside, the flat tire guy. My brain came to a stop so abruptly it practically skidded. No way, no, absolutely not. What kind of sitcom universe am I living in? Good morning, he said, smiling like fate was a personal inside joke. I stood frozen for half a second before my feet remembered what walking was and carried me toward the table. Hi, I managed, though it came out with a strange, breathy laugh I didn't mean to make. Please, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him, have a seat. I sat, trying not to look shocked, but I could feel the expression on my face doing whatever it wanted. He folded his hands on the table, leaning back slightly, eyes bright in a way that told me he was enjoying this moment far more than I was prepared for. I remember you, he said casually, like he was talking about seeing me at a grocery store, not on the shoulder of a highway changing his tire. I swallowed. Yeah, I remember you too. He laughed a warm, friendly sound that instantly made me feel less like I was doomed. I have to say, I didn't expect the woman who saved my morning to walk into my office a couple weeks later. Office, that one word clarified everything. So you work here. I asked, though the folder in front of him and the way he sat confidently at the head of the table already answered that question. More than work here, he said with a slight shrug. I'm the new branch manager. My jaw almost dropped. Branch manager, the universe wasn't just funny today, it was downright theatrical. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. So, he said, a playful smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, you know how to use a tire jack, huh? Let's see if you can manage a team just as well. I laughed an actual laugh, not a nervous one, because suddenly the entire impossible situation felt hysterically perfect. My nerves loosened, my shoulders relaxed. For the first time ever in an interview room, I didn't feel like I had to pretend. If anything, I felt like the universe had walked me straight into the punchline of a joke I didn't know I was part of. I straightened in my chair, lifted my chin a little, and smiled back at him. All right then, I said. Let's find out. When the interview ended, my head felt like it was packed with helium light, floaty, and on the verge of drifting away. I thanked him again, shook his hand, which was absolutely not necessary, but he offered it, and I wasn't about to decline, then stepped out of the conference room, trying to look composed. I made it exactly 5 steps down the hallway before I exhaled all the air I'd been holding in and silently mouthed, what just happened. I didn't know if I aced the interview or bombed it. I didn't know if I said anything intelligent or if my brain simply replaced half my vocabulary with awkward laughter. I just knew that I'd somehow ended up being interviewed by the same man whose tire I'd changed on the side of a highway in the cold. And the coincidence felt so huge it bordered on unreal. I practically floated out of the building, and the second the glass doors closed behind me, I stopped on the sidewalk, closed my eyes for one long moment, and let out a shaky, disbelieving laugh. Okay, I murmured to myself, that was insane. The crisp afternoon breeze swept through the street, warm sunlight spilling across the pavement in that perfect, early spring way that makes everything feel possible. I started walking without much direction, partly to clear my head, partly because I needed air, partly because if I didn't move, I might explode from the strange cocktail of adrenaline and confusion swirling inside me. My steps eventually led me toward a small cafe a block away. Its chalkboard sign out front read fresh pastries, questionable life choices welcome, which somehow felt deeply appropriate for my mood. I slipped inside, took a seat by the window, and wrapped my hands around a hot cup of coffee like it was a grounding stone. Outside, people walked by, chatting, hurrying, laughing, living normal, non-chaotic lives. Lucky them, I took a slow sip, savoring the warmth, and tried to replay the interview in my head. Every memory felt like watching my own life through frosted glass, a little blurry, a little unreal. He's the branch manager. I whispered under my breath, still not over it, of all the people in the city. He's the one running the office I applied to. The universe had a sense of humor that much was now undeniable. I stared into my coffee like it might give me answers. It didn't. Rude. What stuck with me the most wasn't the interview questions or the professional discussion, though those were thankfully normal, but the way he looked at me when I walked into the room. Not in a weird way, not in a flirty way, just surprised, genuinely delighted, like fate had tugged on both of our sleeves at once, saying, "Look, look what I did." I wondered what he must have thought when I walked in. Did he think I followed him there? Did he laugh afterward when he realized I was applying for a job under him? Did he think it was as absurdly coincidental as I did? I pressed my palms to my cheeks. They were still warm. Great, I was probably still blushing like someone experiencing civilization for the first time. I took another sip of coffee, longer this time, more grounding, and then my phone buzzed. I startled hard enough that I almost spilled my drink. With a shaky hand, I pulled the phone from my bag. Unknown number. My heart did a full somersault. No, impossible. It couldn't be him. It was way too soon. Companies take days to get back to you. Right. That was the rule. That was the ritual. That was how the world worked. Except apparently not today. My thumb hesitated, hovering above the screen for a beat that felt like a lifetime. Finally, I answered. Hello, there was a quiet breath on the other end, then a voice I definitely recognized. Hi, it's me. I blinked rapidly, suddenly incapable of normal bodily functions. Oh, hi. His voice was steady, easy, warm. I hope I'm not calling too soon. Too soon. If he'd called any sooner, he would have met me in the hallway. No, it's fine, I said, trying extremely hard to sound like a functioning adult. I just wanted to say, thank you again for earlier and for the interview. I enjoyed talking with you. My chest tightened with something that was not panic, something a lot softer. I enjoyed it too. I admitted. There was a pause, gentle, not awkward. Then he spoke again. Are you still nearby? I glanced automatically out the cafe window, as if he might somehow be standing across the street. Yes, good, he said. If you haven't already eaten, there's a great little place around the corner. I'm heading there now, if you're free. Maybe we could talk a bit more. No interview questions this time. My heartbeat tripped. Then soared, yeah. I said softly, I'm free. Perfect. I'll meet you in a few minutes. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the cafe window, flushed cheeks, wide eyes, the unmistakable expression of a woman who had just stumbled into something she didn't yet understand, but suddenly wanted to. I stood, smoothed my blouse, took one steady breath, and stepped back into the sunlight. For the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't nervous, I was excited. 2 days later, I was sprawled across my bed like a Victorian widow recovering from the vapors, staring at the ceiling with the kind of dramatic intensity reserved for poets and people who overthink every human interaction they've ever had. Had I said something weird during the interview? Did he think I was unprofessional? Was our coincidence charming or suspicious? Did he regret inviting me to lunch afterward? Did I talk too much, too little? Why did I choose that blouse? These were the kinds of thoughts swirling endlessly around my head, and I was dangerously close to diagnosing myself with chronic, making everything a big deal-itis. My phone lay next to me, face down, because I'd convinced myself that staring at it wouldn't make it ring faster, even though I'd already checked it 11 times that morning. I wasn't expecting a miracle. I just wanted closure, a yes or no, a sign that the universe hadn't played a prank on me for its own amusement. The ceiling fan spun lazily overhead. My cat, Pumpkin, snored softly beside me, blissfully unaware that her mother was unraveling. Then my phone buzzed, not a notification, not an email, not some spam call telling me I'd won a free cruise. A ringtone. I froze. The dramatic Victorian widow in me straightened up immediately. My stomach tightened. I reached for the phone with slow, trembling fingers as if it might bite me and turned it over. Unknown number. Again. I swallowed hard, sat up, and cleared my throat like I needed to sound professional even though nobody could hear me yet. Then I answered, hello. A familiar voice filled the line. Hi, it's me. My heart executed an Olympic-level gymnastics routine. Hi. I managed, trying not to sound out of breath from, lying down and panicking, apparently. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time, he said warmly. No, I'm free, I replied, sitting up straighter even though he obviously couldn't see me. There was a tiny pause, warm, calm, confident, the kind of pause people use when they already know what they're going to say will matter. I'll get straight to it, he said. We'd like to offer you the position. I didn't breathe for a full second. My ears buzzed, my chest tightened, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I might pass out in the most unprofessional way possible. You're offering me the job, I repeated, just to make sure I hadn't hallucinated. Yes, he said. I could hear the smile in his voice. Your interview was impressive, and well, I already knew you had initiative. Hard to forget someone who changes your tire on the side of the road without hesitation. I covered my mouth with my hand to muffle the embarrassingly emotional noise that escaped. Wow, thank you, I said, blinking rapidly as my eyes filled with tears I absolutely did not approve of. I'm honored and shocked, mostly shocked. He laughed. Good shocked or bad shocked? Good, I said quickly. Definitely good. Well, he replied, that's a relief. I was worried you'd think the whole situation was weird. Oh, it's weird, I said, extremely weird, but in the best possible way. He chuckled again, soft, warm, familiar in a way that was becoming dangerously comfortable. We'll send the formal offer to your email this afternoon, but I wanted to call personally. Something fluttered in my chest at the word personally. I appreciate that, I said, and I did, more than I could articulate. After giving me a few details about the start date and onboarding process, he paused, then added lightly, and hey, if you ever see me stranded on the road again, feel free not to help. I don't think my heart could handle another coincidence like this. I laughed for real this time. No promises. We said goodbye, and when the call ended, I stared at my reflection in my dark phone screen. A job offer, a wild coincidence, a day I would never forget. And for the first time in months, maybe longer, I felt something settle quietly, warmly into place. Hope,